In March 2025, the United States Congress passed a law that almost nobody noticed. There were no protests, no headlines, no angry editorials or viral campaigns. The vote was not even close. It passed with bipartisan support, which in today's political climate should have been your first warning sign that something was very wrong. The law had a boring name, the kind designed to make your eyes glaze over, buried in a 2,000-page spending bill that barely anyone read. And yet, this single piece of legislation may have just set America on the exact same path that destroyed the British economy, collapsed the British pound, and reduced what was once the most powerful nation on earth to a secondary power scrambling for relevance. You need to hear this story. You need to understand what just happened, because by the time most Americans realize what this law actually does, it will be far too late to stop it. If you care about your financial future, if you care about your children's future, hit that subscribe button right now. Let me take you back to 1797, not to America, but to Britain, because what happened in Britain over the next 150 years is the blueprint for what is about to happen here. And the law America just passed is the first page of that blueprint. In 1797, Britain faced a crisis. Wars with France had drained the treasury. There was a run on the banks. People were lining up to convert their paper money into gold because they were terrified that the paper would become worthless. The Bank of England was on the verge of collapse. So the British government did something that had never been done before. They passed the Bank Restriction Act. This law did one simple thing. It suspended the convertibility of the British pound into gold. Before this law, you could walk into the Bank of England with a pound note and demand gold. After this law, you could not. The paper money was no longer backed by anything physical, just paper, backed only by the government's promise. The law was supposed to be temporary. Just a few months, they said, just until the crisis passes. Trust us. That temporary measure lasted 24 years. During those 24 years, something insidious happened. The British government discovered they could print money without immediate consequences. They could fund wars, fund projects, fund anything they wanted just by creating more pounds. And for a while, it seemed to work. The economy did not collapse. People still used the currency. Life went on. But beneath the surface, something was rotting. Inflation began creeping upward. The pound lost purchasing power every single year. People who had saved money for their entire lives watched it become worth less and less. The wealth of ordinary British citizens was being silently confiscated through currency debasement, and most of them did not even understand what was happening. When Britain finally returned to the gold standard in 1821, the damage had been done. The precedent had been set. The government had learned that it could manipulate the currency, and the public would accept it. All you needed was the right crisis, the right excuse, and there is always another crisis. Fast forward to 1914. World War I begins. Once again, they suspended the gold standard. Once again, it was supposed to be temporary. Once again, the printing presses started running. After the war, Britain tried to go back to gold at the pre-war exchange rate, pretending the pound was still worth what it had been before they printed mountains of new currency. It was economic fantasy, and the British economy spent the next decade suffering for it. Then came 1931. The Great Depression was destroying economies worldwide. Speculators were attacking the pound because everyone could see that the math did not add up. Britain was spending more than it earned. The currency was overvalued. The gold reserves were insufficient. In September 1931, Britain left the gold standard permanently, not temporarily, permanently. The pound was now just paper, backed by nothing but the government's word and the country's economic output. And here is what they do not teach you in economics class. That decision to permanently sever the pound from any physical backing was the beginning of the end for British economic dominance. Without the discipline of gold, without any external constraint on money creation, British government spent and borrowed and printed with abandon. They funded a massive welfare state. They maintained a global empire they could no longer afford. They made promises they could not keep and wrote checks they could not cash. And the entire system stayed afloat only because the world still needed pounds for international trade. But that dependency did not last forever. By the 1950s, the dollar was rising. By the 1960s, the pound was in crisis after crisis. By the 1970s, Britain had to go begging to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout like some third world country. The pound that had once been the world's reserve currency was now a joke. British citizens faced inflation rates over 20%. The economy was called the sick man of Europe. all because decades earlier, the government had removed the one constraint that prevented them from destroying their own currency. Now let me tell you what America just did. Last month, Congress passed a law that changes how the Federal Reserve is allowed to interact with the Treasury Department. The technical details are complex and deliberately obscure, but here is what it actually does. It removes one of the last remaining barriers between the Treasury, which spends money, and the Federal Reserve, which creates money. Before this law, there were regulations that forced some separation between fiscal and monetary policy. The Treasury could not just directly order the Fed to print money to cover government spending. There were procedures, limitations, at least the appearance of independence. It was not perfect, but there were still some guardrails. This new law removes those guardrails. It allows for what economists call fiscal monetary coordination. In plain English, it allows the government to print money to pay its bills with fewer restrictions than ever before. The justification was the usual. We face unprecedented challenges. The debt ceiling fights are destabilizing. We need flexibility to respond to crises. Trust us. We will use this power responsibly. It is the exact same justification Britain used in 1797. Just temporary, just until the crisis passes. Just trust us. And just like in Britain, this will never be temporary. You do not give government the power to print money and expect them to voluntarily give it back. That is not how power works. Here is what is about to happen. I am not guessing. I am reading from a script that history has already written. Within the next few years, the U.S. government will face another fiscal crisis. Maybe it is a recession, maybe it is a war, maybe it is a banking crisis, or debt ceiling showdown. The specific trigger does not matter. What matters is that when that crisis comes, the government will use this new law to solve the problem in the easiest way possible. They will print money, not a little money. A lot of money, trillions of dollars. They will call it quantitative easing or emergency monetary intervention or whatever focus group term sounds least scary, but it will be money printing, pure and simple. And just like in Britain after 1797, it will seem to work at first. The immediate crisis will be resolved. The government will not default. Markets will stabilize. Everyone will breathe a sigh of relief and say, see, the doomsayers were wrong. Everything is fine. But everything will not be fine, because you cannot create real wealth by printing paper. You can only redistribute existing wealth, and when governments print money, they redistribute it from savers to borrowers, from the prudent to the reckless, from ordinary citizens to the politically connected. Inflation will come, not immediately. It takes time for newly created money to work its way through the economy, but it will come. First in asset prices, stocks will boom, real estate will boom. The wealthy who own assets will get wealthier. The middle class, who live on wages, will fall further behind. Then it will come to consumer prices. Groceries will cost more. Gas will cost more. Rent will cost more. Everything will cost more. Your salary might go up, but it will not go up as fast as prices. You will feel like you are working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. You will be right. And here is the truly diabolical part. The government will blame anyone but themselves. They will blame greedy corporations. They will blame supply chain issues. They will blame foreign countries. They will blame climate change. They will blame anything except the actual cause, which is that they printed trillions of dollars and destroyed the purchasing power of the currency you depend on. Britain went through this exact cycle after they disconnected the pound from gold. Decades of inflation, currency crises, declining living standards, all while the government blamed external factors and denied responsibility. The British people watched their empire crumble and their savings evaporate, and most of them never understood that it all traced back to that one decision to let the government print unlimited money. America is about to learn the same lesson. The law passed last month is our version of Britain's Bank Restriction Act. It is the moment we cut the last thread connecting our currency to any form of discipline or restraint. And just like Britain, we will spend the next several decades slowly, then suddenly, destroying the dollar's value, and with it, the American standard of living. You need to understand something crucial. This is not a left versus right issue. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. Both parties voted for this law. Both parties want the ability to spend without the political pain of raising taxes. Both parties are perfectly happy to steal your wealth through inflation rather than ask for it openly through taxation. The left wants to print money to fund social programs. The right wants to print money to fund tax cuts and military spending. They fight about what to spend the money on, but they both agree that printing it is easier than making hard choices. They are both leading you off the same cliff, just arguing about the music to play on the way down. Let me show you the numbers. The U.S. national debt is currently over $36 trillion. The annual interest payment on that debt is now over $1 trillion per year. We are paying over $1 trillion every single year, just in interest on money we have already borrowed. That is more than we spend on education, transportation, and veterans' benefits combined. It is almost as much as we spend on defense, and it is growing every single year. Now here is the problem. Tax revenue is not growing fast enough to cover this. The government faces a choice: cut spending dramatically, raise taxes dramatically, or default on the debt. All three options are politically impossible. No politician wants to cut popular programs. No politician wants to raise taxes by the amounts required, and defaulting would destroy America's credibility and collapse the financial system. So what is the fourth option? The option that is politically easy, that requires no hard choices. Print money. Use the Federal Reserve to buy Treasury bonds, which is just a fancy way of saying print dollars to pay the government's bills. This is exactly what the new law makes easier to do. Britain faced this exact same choice in the 1940s and 50s. They were drowning in war debt. Their empire was falling apart. They could not cut spending fast enough. They could not raise taxes high enough. So they printed. They inflated. They destroyed the pound's value to escape their debt burden, and British citizens paid the price through decades of declining living standards. America is about to do the same thing. The law passed last month is the starter's pistol. The race to destroy the dollar has begun. Now let me tell you the second part of the British story. When Britain started printing money to solve their fiscal problems, other countries noticed. They watched the pound lose value year after year. They watched British inflation spiral, and they started to lose faith in British currency. Remember, the pound was the world's reserve currency. Countries held pounds in their central bank reserves. International trade was conducted in pounds, but that faith was based on trust. Trust that Britain would manage its currency responsibly. Trust that the pound would hold its value. That trust eroded slowly, then all at once. By the 1960s, there were repeated sterling crises. Countries would start dumping pounds, fearing devaluation. The British government would have to raise interest rates to painful levels just to convince people to keep holding the currency. It became a vicious cycle. In 1967, the pound was devalued by 14% overnight. Millions of people who had savings in pounds watched their wealth evaporate. Countries that held pounds in reserves lost billions. The pound's status as a reserve currency was effectively over. By 1976, Britain had to go to the IMF for a humiliating bailout, accepting harsh conditions and outside control of their economic policy. The mighty British pound, which had ruled global finance for over a century, was reduced to a secondary regional currency in less than 30 years. All because the government chose the easy path of printing money instead of living within their means. The dollar is walking the exact same path right now. We are the current reserve currency. The world holds dollars. The world trades in dollars. But that trust is not infinite. Every time we print trillions of dollars, every time we run trillion-dollar deficits, we erode that trust a little bit more. China sees this, Russia sees this, Europe sees this, the BRICS nations see this. They are already moving away from the dollar. They are signing agreements to trade in their own currencies. They are building alternative payment systems. They are reducing their dollar reserves, and the law passed last month will accelerate it further. Because now the world knows that America has given itself permission to print unlimited money. They know that when the next crisis comes, we will choose inflation over default. They know that holding dollars means watching their value slowly evaporate, so they will hold fewer dollars. And when the world holds fewer dollars, the entire system that has supported American prosperity for 80 years begins to collapse. This is not theory. This is historical pattern recognition. First, the policy change that allowed unlimited money printing, then the gradual loss of trust, then the currency crises, then the loss of reserve status, then the collapse of living standards. It is a script written in history, and America is following it line by line. Let me give you a timeline. Decline is a process, not an event. Britain's decline from dominant power to secondary nation took 30 years. America's decline will probably take 10 to 20 years from the point of no return. We might already be past that point. The law passed last month might be what historians looking back will identify as the moment, but you will not feel it happen all at once. You will just notice that things keep getting harder, that your paycheck does not go as far, that retirement keeps getting pushed back, that the kind of life your parents had seems increasingly out of reach. That is what decline feels like from the inside. Not a catastrophe, but a slow grinding down of possibilities and prosperity. Britain experienced this from roughly 1950 to 1980, 3 decades where life just kept getting harder. Americans born after 2025 will experience something similar. They will grow up in a country that is still technically the richest in the world, but where that wealth is increasingly concentrated, where opportunity is increasingly limited, where the currency is increasingly worthless, and most of them will never know that it could have been different, that there was a specific moment, a specific law, a specific choice that set everything in motion. That law was passed last month, and almost nobody noticed. When Britain disconnected the pound from gold, they fundamentally changed the relationship between citizens and their government. Before 1797, British citizens had a form of protection. If they did not trust the government, they could convert their pounds to gold. This check on government power existed. After 1797, that check was gone. The government had a monopoly on money, and citizens had no escape route. You were trapped in whatever monetary policy the government chose. This is the real danger of the law America just passed. It is not just about inflation, it is about power. It concentrates enormous power in the hands of government and removes one of the last checks on that power. This means that your savings, your wages, your retirement accounts, everything denominated in dollars is now completely at the mercy of political decisions made by people who face no consequences. Congress can pass any spending bill they want, knowing the Fed will create the money to pay for it, and you have no way to protect yourself except to exit the dollar entirely. But exiting the dollar is not easy. You get paid in dollars. Your savings are in dollars. Your entire economic life is denominated in a currency that is now explicitly designed to lose value over time to make government spending easier. You are trapped in a system that is extracting wealth from you. Britain did this to its citizens, and it destroyed multiple generations of wealth. People who worked their entire lives, who saved diligently, watched their savings become worthless. Not because of war or natural disaster, but because their government chose the easy path of currency debasement. American citizens are about to experience the same thing. The middle class will be slowly hollowed out. The wealthy who own assets will be fine. The poor will suffer, but they are already suffering. It is the middle class that will be destroyed, the people who played by the rules and trusted the system. This is not accidental. Modern monetary policy is a wealth transfer mechanism from the middle class to the government and the wealthy. Inflation benefits debtors, and the biggest debtor is the government. Everyone else loses. Imagine you have $100,000 in savings, your emergency fund, your retirement cushion, your financial security. Now the government starts printing money. Inflation runs at 7% per year. In 10 years, your $100,000 will have the purchasing power of about $48,000 in today's dollars. You will have lost more than half your wealth without spending a penny. Meanwhile, the government will have inflated away half the real value of its debt. The wealthy person who owned stocks and real estate will have seen those asset prices double. You, the saver, will have been robbed. Not by a thief in the night, but by your own government in broad daylight. This is what happened in Britain. This is what is about to happen in America. And the law passed last month makes it inevitable. When Britain's pound collapsed as a reserve currency in the 1960s and 70s, Britain lost more than just money. They lost influence. They lost power. They lost the ability to shape global events. Before the currency collapse, Britain could impose sanctions, and countries would comply. After the collapse, all of that evaporated. Britain became just another country. This is what awaits America when the dollar loses its reserve status. We currently enjoy what economists call exorbitant privilege. We can print money and the world has to accept it because they need dollars for trade. We can run enormous trade deficits because other countries need to accumulate dollars. We can impose sanctions and cut countries off from the dollar system, and it cripples them. The dollar is a weapon, maybe our most powerful weapon, and we use it freely. All of that ends when the dollar is no longer the dominant reserve currency. Suddenly, our sanctions do not matter. Suddenly, our deficits matter. Suddenly, we have to actually produce things and balance our books like every other country. We become normal. And for a country that has been exceptional for 80 years, normal feels like decline. The clock is ticking. Maybe we have 10 years before the crisis hits, maybe 20 years, but it is coming. You cannot print unlimited money without consequences. You cannot run trillion-dollar deficits forever. You cannot maintain reserve currency status while deliberately destroying your currency's value. History has tested these propositions repeatedly. The answer is always the same. So what do? How do you protect yourself when your government has just legalized the theft of your wealth through inflation? That is the question every British citizen should have asked in 1797, and almost none of them did. They trusted the system. They thought Britain was too powerful to fail. They were wrong. Do not make the same mistake. The first step is understanding what just happened. Most Americans do not know about the law passed last month. Most Americans do not understand how money is created or how inflation works. That ignorance is dangerous. You cannot protect yourself from a threat you do not understand. The second step is to diversify out of dollar-denominated assets. This does not mean selling everything and buying gold bars to bury in your backyard, though some of that is not the worst idea. It means holding assets that will maintain value during inflation. Real estate, commodities, stocks of companies with real earnings and real assets, anything that is not just paper denominated in a currency your government is deliberately devaluing. The third step is to build real skills and real value. When currencies collapse, people who have skills that others need do fine. Plumbers and electricians and farmers and mechanics and doctors do fine. People whose wealth consists entirely of dollars in a bank account do not. The fourth step is to reduce your dependence on the system. Debt feels like leverage when times are good. It feels like a noose when currencies collapse. The less you owe, the less vulnerable you are. Britain's decline hurt people unequally. People who understood what was happening and prepared did relatively fine. People who trusted the government and kept all their wealth in pounds suffered immensely. The same will be true in America. This crisis will hit the unprepared hardest. I am telling you this because knowledge is power. The British people did not have the benefit of seeing another country go through this first. We have the benefit of their experience. We can see exactly what happens when a government is given unlimited power to print money. We have no excuse for being surprised. The law passed last month. The die is cast. America has chosen the path of monetary debasement and currency collapse. The next 10 to 20 years will see the consequences play out. The dollar will lose value. Living standards will decline. America's global power will wane. This is not pessimism. This is pattern recognition. But on an individual level, you still have agency. You can be like the British citizens who saw what was coming and protected themselves, or you can be like the ones who trusted the system and lost everything. The question is whether you will look. I have shown you the pattern. I have drawn the parallel. The law that broke Britain was passed in 1797. America just passed the same law in 2025. The consequences for Britain took decades to materialize, but they were inevitable. The same is now true for America. You cannot change what Congress does. You cannot force the Federal Reserve to act responsibly, but you can save yourself. You can protect your family. You can prepare for what is coming. The British Empire fell because it chose the easy path over the hard path. It chose printing over prudence. It chose inflation over discipline. The citizens paid the price. Do not let that be your story. Do not be the person who looks back in 10 years and says, I saw the warning signs. I just did not think it would affect me. It will affect you. It will affect everyone. The only question is whether you prepared or whether you assumed the system would save you. The system will not save you. The system is what is broken. You have to save yourself. Watch this video again. Share it. Make sure the people you care about understand what just happened. And then take action. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Now. Because the clock is ticking and history waits for no one. I will see you in the next one.